Hi everyone, welcome to another edition of Liquid Loans Behind the Scenes. It's been quite a while, I do apologise for that. There's been a lot going on in the background, so all our focus and attention is where it should be, and that's on the protocol and the things that the user is going to be interacting with, dApps and things like that. So quite a lot of things going on in the background. But I'm hoping to get a few more of these videos out to you guys over the coming months. So apologies for being a little bit slack on the updates, but hey, if you've been paying attention to our Liquid Loans main channel with Matt and CC, then I'm sure you've been getting some really good feedback from those guys. What I do is I tend to be a little bit more technical in the things I deliver. So my sessions are a little bit different from the general updates you get from Matt and the crew. So what am I here to talk about today? Well, we're going to have a look at validators. Now we have recently, Matt has done a great video on validators, and there's some information on the Liquid Loans website if you go to the Validator tab. But I wanted to talk a little bit more about some of the technical considerations, and as a community, what we should be looking at. I recently ran a little bit of a questionnaire on Twitter just to gauge the response of what people have got going on in their brain about, okay, what am I going to do when the network launches? First of all, am I going to delegate some of my pulse to a validator? And if so, why would I do that? What would be the reasons? Like how would I select who I was going to delegate to? So it was interesting to get some of the community's takes, and there were some things that were very prominent in the responses I got, and then there were some things that were one or two people would make a comment on, which I thought was interesting. So what I want to do is just unpack some of the responses I got. I won't actually go into the individual responses, but just I've had a bit of a think about the general way people are perceiving this, and just wanted to add some input onto that. So let's have a quick chat about validators in general, or more importantly, if you have a look at the diagram I've got up here, let's just have a very high level view of what's going on the network. So the little white boxes you see in here, that's the blockchain. We've got two different types of nodes here. We've got validating nodes and just normal nodes. So as a user of the system, whenever we will be interacting with all of these types of nodes, but specifically when we choose to delegate our stake, we're delegating them to choose a validator. What's important about a validator? Well, they're the guys that actually process the transactions on the network. So someone sends a transaction from their wallet, gets bundled up and sent to the validators for essentially validation for mining in inverted commas that transaction and producing the next block. So the validators are bundling up the transactions, saying, yep, these are the ones we're going to include in the block, and then each particular validator will have a turn at writing one of those blocks. So there's 33 of these validating nodes that will be responsible for the processing of transactions and the security on the Pulse chain. So as a user or a delegator, you will choose one or more validators to put your stake with, and depending on which validators get the most amount of delegated stake, so i.e. votes, then they will be selected to be in the top 33 nodes that do the validation. So that's essentially what the validators do. And then we've got other supporting nodes on the network which keep a copy of the blockchain, but then may do other things. So they may be what we call an RPC endpoint, where if this fellow over here wants to use an application, the application needs, like MetaMask, needs to point to an RPC endpoint, just so it knows how to connect to the network. And indexing nodes. So indexing nodes read the data on the blockchain and then store it in a way that's easier for applications to be able to access that data and pull relevant information from the blockchain. What makes an application run really slow is when it has to go and read every little bit of data sequentially from the history of the blockchain, digging through each block. It's not an efficient way to read data. So we have indexing nodes which extract the data that is used frequently or is accessed often, and presents that in a way so that applications can actually access that a lot quicker. So many different nodes will be on the network. Only 33 of the nodes will be in validation mode, so they're in rotation and processing the transactions. So it's important that we select the right ones to do that. You don't want flaky nodes. You want, we'll go into all the details, but you want to have a good rounded selection of those validators just to ensure that the network's at its peak performance. Okay, so let's delve into that just a little bit. And as you know, on these sessions, I like to try and keep them short and sweet. So we usually try and keep it to about 16 minutes. So we are going to blast through this, but let's have a little bit of a look. So what are some of the considerations we need to think about when we're choosing who are going to be the validators on the chain or on the network? Well, primarily the most important thing is chain security. So you want to have a good cross-section of validating nodes that we can trust and that they're good actors. They're doing the right thing on the network. So that's probably the biggest thing, is chain security. You want that to be solid. Operational uptime. So it's no good having a validating node that keeps going offline for whatever technical reason, but is just not available when its turn comes around to process a block. It's just missing. It's inefficient. It slows down the whole chain. You've then got to go through a process of, okay, well, if he's not listening now or not able to produce a block, we've got to slot someone else in to produce that block. So it delays the block production on the network. It's not a good thing. So we need good operational uptime. Actually, into that, I would also add good processing speed and things like that as well. So it's no good having something that underperforms. Decentralization. We don't want a situation where one entity is running all the nodes on the network. I think we can agree that that's not healthy. Okay, so and as delegators, we get to participate in who we select to do that, and that's important. Why you should be delegating is because then you get your say in, okay, how decentralized is this network? Okay, is it where are the nodes hosted geographically? Who controls them? Things like that. So it's really important that we get a spread of a good, healthy amount of decentralization in the network. I think we can all agree that's what we got into this space for, was to not trust a single entity. And contributors. So are the people running the validators, do they contribute to the overall health of the ecosystem? Are they? And don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with someone just firing up a validator and that's all they do, and they sit in the background, and if they run a good validator, happy days. That's all good. But what else do they bring to the community is something we're looking at, or looking for, I guess. All right, so these are just some very broad brush, high-level things that we would look for. So let's have a think about, well, let's discuss what the results of my little Twitter information gathering session were. And above everything else, the thing that shone out as to how most people are going to select their validator choice was really based on personality. So what I mean by that is if they've seen someone doing YouTube videos, I hate using this word, but were seen to be an influencer in the Hex or Pulse community, then that was far and away the most prominent reason why people were going to select that validator. And that's totally fine. There's nothing wrong with that, because they're choosing someone that they see is contributing to the community, has a big presence, so they have a vested interest in the community. So they're not not bad things, and I'm not saying that's not the right way to do it. What I'm saying is that was the most prominent reason. And what I also noticed was people seem to be focused on selecting one validator. Okay, so that was probably the two big takeaways, and it might have been in the way I phrased the question. So I said, what considerations would you put into choosing a validator? And I probably should have said validators, but people seem to be focused on, okay, well, if I'm going to choose a validator, this is the validator I would choose. And by and large, it came down to presence in the community and personality. And I've got to say, shout out to David Feeder, because he far and away was one of the most popular personalities in the results from those sort of putting those questions out there. So the reason why that is he has been a massive contributor. Everyone knows that David's been, since day one, said he was going to be operating a validating node. He's provided great information on the technicals. He's explained a lot of things to people. So he's a very great contributor to the ecosystem. So it's well deserved. Like he's got that kudos and that recognition. So a big shout out to him for that. He's put a lot of time and energy into educating the community and to actually running the nodes. Okay, so that is a very valid reason to choose someone, but it's not everything we need to take into consideration. So let's have a little bit of a chat about some of the things we should be considering when we do this, and what will get us the most healthiest network, I guess. Okay, so known good actors versus anon, so anonymous. Like I said, I think it's important to have known good actors that we can delegate some stake to. Do I think it's the be all end all? Absolutely not, because the beautiful part about running a decentralized network is not having a point of failure from a regulatory point of view. So let's say we've got Liquid Loans running a validator node, David Feeder running a validator node, and the authorities, for whatever reason, let's play some imaginable horribles, they say, we're not happy with what you're doing, you need to shut the network down, and they can point a finger at Liquid Loans or David Feeder and say, guys, I need you to decommission your server. Okay, so whilst from a community aspect, having known good actors gives us that bit of assurance that it's a trusted person or a quality person, someone of good character that's running the node, it is also a regulatory point of concern. So having anon teams is not necessarily bad, and they can be anon but still have a presence. So they could put up a website and say, this is our validator address such and such, but you don't know who it is, what it is. There's no point of attack there. They may just they may just be present in Telegram, so they don't even have a web page, but they're present by an anonymous account in Telegram. But you can communicate with them if you choose, but you never know who they are really. So it's not necessarily a bad thing. So there's a spectrum of things, but it's just because there's not a prominent name on a validator, don't write it off. That's not a bad thing. You don't know most of the miners in Ethereum, still works okay. Okay, so that's not necessarily a bad thing. So we mentioned the decentralization. So when we say decentralization, what are we talking about? Well, we're talking about from an entity perspective. So do you want Liquid Loans running every validating node on the chain? Well, probably not. That's not a very decentralized chain. So you want to have various groups of people or node operators that are not part of the same organization or same group, or however you want to term it in this weird and wacky crypto world, but are not, I guess, under the same banner. Just to give you that, the different points of view and and get rid of the risks of that central party disappearing or something happen. Okay, so you want a good spread of people from, or node operators from that perspective, but also geographically. Do you want all the nodes operating in America? Probably not. You probably want them spread out across the globe, some down in Australia, some in the UK or Europe. So you want a good dispersion geographically of the validating nodes. You also want good dispersion so they're not all on AWS or who else is there? Azure, or so they're not all on a cloud provider. There's some in data centers, some on cloud providers because they give good scalability. So you want a bit of a mixture of so geographically and so that there's not that centralization risk. So centralization is a funny thing. You may have different parties operating the nodes, but if they're all operating them on a cloud provider, you're centralized. Okay, so we're looking for that decentralization on a few levels there. The tech stack. So this does sort of lend into the decentralization side of things a little bit, where what tech stack are they running on? Are they all running on what we call bare metal? So the operators own the actual server, sitting in a data center or in their own premise, or is it on a cloud provider? How much RAM do they have? How much storage space? What type of storage do they have? Is it slow disks, fast disks? Is the memory really fast? How much processing do they have? Can they scale? What happens if one of the nodes they're operating falls over? Is there failover? So there's a whole lot of tech stack stuff that sits behind this as well. And whilst the node operators may choose to disclose that or not, that's something I think as delegators we should be at least inquiring about. Okay, so what are you guys actually running? And there's a fine line between what someone will tell you they're running, because it's operational security concerns as well. So they can release a certain amount, but they don't want to say, I've got XYZ machine running this software version housed in this location. It's too much information. Like that is, that's operational security risk there. So we've got to find that balance to know that we've got good operators, well decentralized, solid hardware and tech stack, without giving away too much information. Okay, so just a lot of different things that we need to weigh up when we're choosing how we select delegators, how we select to delegate our pulse. Obviously, another big thing that came up from everyone was the yield. What sort of yield am I going to get? I'll go with someone I know and provides me a good yield. Okay, and that's all valid as well. So some people will choose who they delegate to based on how much monetary reward they're going to get. Totally valid if that's the way you want to do it. I'm happy to give up yield to know that we've got better decentralization or someone running a better tech stack. So I'm okay to give up a little bit of yield to ensure that the network's healthy. But yield returns is very important. And this goes into the yield returns as well. So we're not trying to elect a president here. It's not one validator. You don't have to select just one validator and he's the guy I want up the top. That's where I want to see him right up the top of the list. It means nothing whether he's at the top of the list or at 33rd in the list. Okay, they're all going to produce the same amount of blocks. So we're after a good house of representatives, is the way I've put it as an analogy. We want a good group of actors, a good 33 validators, with all these different characteristics of decentralization, anonymous, known actors. We want a good, well-rounded selection of people or of operators that can run the network. It's not about picking a clear winner here. It's about selecting a group of people or validators that you want to provide the security on the network. How does that tie into the yield returns? If everyone says, I'm going to push everything onto the liquid loans validator. I trust those guys. They're known in the community. I like what they're doing. I'm going to push all my pulse on there and delegate it. Much like staking in Hex, you end up with you've got a bigger pie, but you've got a smaller slice of that pie because the amount you're delegating is very tiny compared to the total amount of delegators on that node. Even though that node operator may be giving 100% of the returns back to the delegators, if you're a thin slither of that return, you're not getting a great yield on your deposit, because there's only so many rewards that will get shared. And like I said, there's 33 of these operators, so the rewards are equal between those operators. So why load up one operator with a crazy amount of delegated stake, unless you truly believe in those operators? Why load them up with so much stake? Because you're not going to get any yield. You're better off spreading it across a number of operators for a few reasons. It gives us a better, more rounded node operator selection, or a group of operators. You spread your yield opportunities across multiple operators. So some of them may have different percentages, but they will also have different amounts staked with them. So that will affect your returns on the pulse you're delegating. And it can get to the stage where if you've got a lot of large people coming in and delegating stake with these operators, and you're a smaller player and you come in and you try to delegate some stake to an operator, you can actually get precluded from being able to delegate because your amount is that insignificant. Now that's the way it works currently. I've tried to do it where try to add a little bit more, just a small amount of pulse to a node, and you actually get an error message where the amount you're trying to add is just, it doesn't equal, I think it's 0.01% of the total, so you can't do it. Your stake is not enough to make a difference, so it's you just don't get it. The system currently will not let you delegate. Now, will that change as the new node software comes out? Possibly, but at the moment that's the way it works. So what you might find is if the delegated stake is too concentrated on particular operators, you may not be able to participate. Okay, and another thing with that, if you get in early, your stake will get in. So you might be a smaller player, and if you delegate early, your stake is a smaller part and you'll get allocated to that delegator. But if you come along a month later and everyone's already delegated to all these guys, if the operation is still as it is to this day, you may not actually be able to delegate. Okay, so just keep that in mind. So yeah, that's how the house of reps and the yields all tie in together. Historical performance. This was another thing that popped up a lot in the feedback I got from everyone was, so primarily known actor that's good in the community, the yields, that was a big one, and historical performance. So are they getting what they call misdemeanors or felonies? So how do you get a misdemeanor or felony as a node operator? Your node's offline when it needs to be online, so it comes the time to produce a block and it's not there, like we mentioned before, and you're basically getting a timeout. The network's going, look, I'm waiting for you to produce this block, and you fail to do it, then okay, here's a cross against your name, so you get a misdemeanor. So they're lagging indicators. So if you've got a list of operators sitting there in the validator list, and you can see one or two of them have got some misdemeanors or felonies, what it means is historically, so they've had an issue, have timed out, and then you've gone back to check those stats later in time. So they're a lagging indicator. Still important to look at, but you're not going to know that until after the event has happened. So that's what I'm saying. They're okay, and you should be keeping an eye on those because it does affect your yield, and obviously they're not being as efficient on the network as they should be. So there's obviously some tech stack issue or operational issue that's causing that node to go offline, and it's not good. So you can come back historically and go, okay, well, that one's got a few misdemeanors. Okay, I'm going to move my delegation to this guy over here who isn't having any misdemeanors. So they're very important indicators, but they're, like I said, they're lagging indicators. What I think is a better approach is to try and do some research up front and find out, okay, well, what's this validator? What are these operators bringing to the table? Are they a proven entity? Are they running another project like a Hedron or Maximus or something like that? Are these guys known? Like we can see they're doing other things in the space. They know how to use tech. They haven't had downtime on any of their other projects. They've told us a little bit about their tech stack and what they're planning on doing with their their nodes. So how much information can you get of that up front? So you're not in a position where you're delegated to a node that is getting misdemeanors and is getting felonies. Okay, so that's being proactive about the way you do your selection. Okay, I think, let me just check. I think we've pretty much covered all the things. Oh no, sorry. We've got one other thing. Ancillary benefits. So, and this probably won't be too obvious when the network first fires up. So the chain goes live, validators come in and they register their validators and make it known to the community that they've got them registered. But what other things come along with supporting that validator? What do I mean by that? Let's say the Hedron team, they're running a validator and they say, if you run a validator and if you delegate with our validator, we might give you X, Y, Z, or you can stake this or do this, or there's some other mechanic there. With liquid loans, if you delegate with the liquid loans validator and you're using our protocol for a vault, is there any other benefits or rewards that come along with that? So there may be ancillary benefits outside of the headline yield that you get from delegating with a particular node operator. So, and I think they're the kinds of things, they won't be immediate, like I said, they're the things that will evolve over time, and people will they'll start to do more integrations and find more clever ways to do this. You might get more Pulse X or incentive token, or who knows, we don't know how this is going to play out, but there may be ancillary benefits for going and choosing a particular node operator or particular validator in the pool. So yeah, just a few things like that may change your decision. Okay, I've blown this one in terms of time. I usually do a 15-16 minute sort of video. This one's blown out to 27 minutes. But hey, I haven't done one for a while, so you got to cut me a little bit of slack there. I've got so much that I needed to cover. Look, I think we'll put a bow on this one here now. I think that's a little bit of information that everyone can take away and think about and put into their decisions of why they would choose a particular validator or operator. And all good things that as community members we should be basing our decisions on if we want good chain security, good operational uptime, good decentralization, and good contributors in the network. Okay, so take all of this information, and when you start to do your delegations, actually put it into practice and use that in the way you choose them. Remember, we're selecting a House of Representatives. We're all here on the same team. It's not about having, as I put a little meme out, a Highlander. There can be only one. This is a team effort by a group of community-selected validators that will run the chain. So just keep that in mind when you're making your selections. That's it for me. I'll catch you all in the next episode of Liquid Loans Behind the Scenes. Bye for now.